For filing status, the IRS cares about your marital status on the last day of the year. That one rule drives almost every spouse died question. If you're still married at year end, you're married for that year. If your spouse died during the year and you didn't remarry by year end, you're treated as married for that year and can usually file a joint return with the decedent. In the year of death, the surviving spouse generally has a choice: married filing jointly with the deceased spouse or married filing separately. On the EA exam, watch for the executor or personal representative. A joint return is allowed if the surviving spouse hasn't remarried by year end. If a joint return is filed, it's signed by the surviving spouse and the executor, if one exists. Remarriage is the big trap. If you remarry before the end of the year your spouse died, you can't file a joint return with the deceased spouse. Instead, your deceased spouse's final return must be married filing separately, typically filed by the executor. And you'll file jointly or separately with your new spouse. EA exam questions: love that late December wedding date. After the year of death comes qualifying surviving spouse, or QSS. It's rare but valuable because it uses the same tax brackets and standard deduction as married filing jointly. You can use QSS for the 2 tax years after the year of death, but only if you don't remarry and you maintain a home for a qualifying child. After those 2 years, you're back to head of household or single. QSS has a picky child rule. You must have a qualifying child for the year, and for QSS, that child must be your child, adopted child, or stepchild. A foster child doesn't count for QSS, even though foster children can count for head of household. You also must pay over half the cost of keeping up the home for the entire year. That entire year phrase is a common exam distractor. Now the weird one: annulment. A divorce ends a valid marriage going forward. An annulment says the marriage never existed. That means the IRS treats you as unmarried for those prior years, even if you filed joint returns. The fix is amended returns on Form 1040X for any open years, switching to single or, if you qualify, head of household. On the EA exam, the word retroactive is your clue. One more exam nuance. Once you file a joint return, you usually can't later switch to separate returns. But there's a special exception when a spouse is deceased. A personal representative can change the decedent's filing status from a joint return to married filing separately by amending up to 1 year after the filing deadline. That's a very testable timing rule. According to the IRS, which factor does not weigh in favor of the IRS approving equitable relief? The choices include abuse by the spouse or former spouse, poor mental or physical health when the return was signed or relief was requested, the taxpayer still living with the spouse, or none of the above. Think about it. The correct answer is the taxpayer still living with his or her spouse. Living together is generally an unfavorable factor, not a favorable one, for equitable relief. A tempting wrong choice is poor mental or physical health, because it sounds negative, but that factor can actually support granting relief when it affected the taxpayer's ability to comply. Marcus's wife moved out on November 1st, 2023, and hasn't returned. Marcus pays all the costs of keeping up the home for himself and his 6-year-old dependent child. He can't get his wife's signature or income info, and he hasn't filed for divorce. What filing status should Marcus use? Married filing jointly with a disclosure, married filing separately, head of household, or single? Think about it. The correct answer is married filing separately. He's still legally married, and he can't file a joint return without his spouse's consent and signature. Head of household is tempting because he supports a child, but without meeting the considered unmarried rules, he can't jump to HO Hoch just because the spouse moved out late in the year.